I guess I'm here because I have no one else to turn to. My name's Greg, I'm 40, and I'm married, or maybe I should say was married, to Lindsay, who's 36. We've been together for 12 years, married for 8. If you'd asked me a year ago, I'd have told you we had a great life. We weren't perfect, sure, but who is? We both had stable jobs, a decent house in a quiet neighborhood, and a shared love of movie nights, camping trips, and weekend brunches. She was my best friend, or so I thought. Things started to shift about 6 months ago. Lindsay works in PR, and she's always been the social butterfly in our relationship. She started a new job with a boutique firm that handles a lot of clients in the entertainment industry. First, I was happy for her. She seemed excited, and I thought it was great that she'd landed a gig doing something she loved. But it wasn't long before I noticed changes. Little things at first, like the way she'd be glued to her phone during dinner, laughing at texts from someone she never named, or how she started dressing a little differently, trading her usual comfy jeans and t-shirts for trendier outfits that seemed designed to turn heads. "Just keeping up with the industry," she'd say when I asked. "I have to look the part." I didn't think much of it at first. Hollywood's weird, right? But then she started coming home later and later, blaming client meetings and networking events. Sometimes she wouldn't come home at all, texting me at midnight to say she was crashing at a coworker's place because she'd had too much to drink. That's when the knot in my stomach started to tighten. One night, I asked her outright if everything was okay between us. She rolled her eyes, sighed like I was being ridiculous, and said, "Greg, not everything's about you. I'm just trying to build my career. Okay? Stop being so insecure." I felt embarrassed for even asking, but the nagging feeling wouldn't go away. Something was off and I couldn't shake it. A couple of weeks after that conversation, Lindsay dropped a bombshell that set everything into motion. "Greg, I'm going to LA for a week," she announced one morning over coffee. "A few of my clients have projects launching, and I need to be there in person." "La?" I asked, surprised. "You didn't mention this before." "It just came up," she said casually, brushing me off. "You know how this industry works. Things happen last minute." Something about the way she said it rubbed me the wrong way. She didn't meet my eyes, and her tone was clipped, like she was daring me to question her. But I didn't push back. I told myself I was being paranoid again. While she was gone, things started clicking into place. The first red flag was her Instagram. Lindsay loves posting every detail of her life online, so I found it odd when her stories were strangely vague. Just generic shots of cocktails and blurry selfies at what looked like rooftop parties. No tags, no people, no context. Then there was the credit card bill. I wasn't snooping. Honestly, I wasn't. I only checked because we'd been trying to save for a vacation, and I wanted to see where we stood. That's when I saw the charges. A hotel suite in Beverly Hills, dinners at fancy restaurants, even a spa treatment for 2. My stomach twisted. Who the hell was she dining and spongy with? The final piece of the puzzle came when I stumbled across a name. Ethan Chase. He's a rising actor in his late 20s, all jawline and charm, who's been making waves in some indie films. I remembered Lindsay casually mentioning him a few weeks ago, saying she'd landed him as a client. But when I Googled him again, I noticed something odd. He was tagged in a few photos on social media from the same places Lindsay had been posting about. It was enough to make me suspicious, so I did what I never thought I'd do. I looked through her laptop. Her email confirmed everything. Hidden between the usual work correspondence were flirty messages with Ethan. It started innocently enough, work banter, compliments about his acting. But then it escalated. "Last night was amazing," one email read. "I can't stop thinking about you. When can we do it again?" There were attachments, too. Photos of them together in a hotel room, her in lingerie, him shirtless and grinning like a cat that got the cream. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. My wife wasn't just cheating on me. She was cheating on me with some wannabe movie star barely out of his 20s. I spent the rest of the day in a haze, alternating between rage, disbelief, and heartbreak. I must have read those emails a dozen times, hoping I was missing something. Some context that would make it less damning. But there was no other way to spin it. She was sleeping with Ethan, and she wasn't even trying to hide it that well. By the time Lindsay came home from her LA trip, I was ready. I didn't want to stew in my anger any longer. I needed answers. She walked through the door that evening like nothing was wrong, pulling her suitcase behind her, looking fresh-faced and glowing. It was like she was a completely different person. Lighter, carefree, and oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. "Hey, babe," she chirped, leaning in for a kiss. I stepped back. "What's wrong?" she asked, her smile faltering. "Who's Ethan?" I asked, my voice as calm as I could manage. Her face froze for a split second, but she recovered quickly. "Ethan? You mean Ethan Chase? He's one of my clients." "Why?" I pulled out my phone and opened the emails I'd forwarded to myself. I held it up to her face, my hand shaking. "Don't play dumb, Lindsay. I know what you've been doing." Her expression darkened immediately. "You went through my laptop?" she snapped, her voice rising. "Jesus, Greg. That's such an invasion of privacy." "Privacy?" I barked out a bitter laugh. "You're lecturing me about privacy while you're screwing some kid behind my back? Don't even try to turn this around on me, Lindsay." She crossed her arms and glared at me. "Fine. Yes, I've been seeing Ethan. Is that what you want to hear? You want me to spell it out for you?" "I want to know why," I said, my voice breaking. "How could you do this to me? To us?" Her eyes narrowed, and she shrugged like it was no big deal. "Because I'm bored, Greg. You've gotten so predictable. Same house, same dinners, same conversations. I needed something exciting, and Ethan, well, he makes me feel alive." Her words hit me like a freight train. "So you threw away our marriage for some fling with a guy who probably doesn't even care about you? You think you're the first older woman he's done this with? You're nothing but a phase to him, Lindsay." Her face flushed with anger. "You don't know what you're talking about. Ethan and I have a real connection. He understands me in ways you never could." "A real connection?" I shouted. "He's a goddamn actor. Lying is literally his job." At that, she rolled her eyes and grabbed her suitcase again. "You're pathetic, Greg. Maybe if you'd actually tried to keep things interesting, I wouldn't have had to look elsewhere." And with that, she walked upstairs, leaving me standing there, feeling like I just lost everything. After Lindsay stormed upstairs, I just stood there, staring at the empty space she left behind. My mind was spinning, trying to make sense of everything she'd said. Bored. Predictable. A real connection. Her words echoed in my head like a broken record, each one cutting deeper than the last. For the next few hours, I sat on the couch in silence, nursing a whiskey and trying to process what had just happened. I kept thinking about the emails, the pictures, and the way she had so casually admitted to the affair like it was my fault. I didn't even know where to start. Sleep was out of the question that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her with Ethan, laughing, touching, kissing. The betrayal felt surreal, like it couldn't possibly be my life. This kind of thing happened to other people, not me. By morning, the sadness had turned into a slow-burning rage. She hadn't even tried to apologize. No regret, no guilt, no "we can work this out." Instead, she'd blamed me like I was the reason she'd decided to cheat, as if my predictability forced her into his arms. The worst part? I started questioning myself. Was I boring? Had I failed her somehow? Maybe I should have done more to keep the spark alive. But then I stopped myself. No, this wasn't on me. I hadn't cheated. I hadn't lied. I hadn't walked out on our marriage just because life wasn't a nonstop adrenaline rush. That was all on her. By midweek, Lindsay and I were barely speaking. She went about her day like nothing had happened. Making coffee, texting on her phone, scrolling Instagram. It was infuriating. Meanwhile, I was walking around like a ghost, trying to decide what the hell to do. Part of me wanted to fight for the marriage. 8 years together isn't something you just throw away, right? Maybe therapy could help us figure out what went wrong. But then I'd remember her smug face, the way she justified her actions, and I'd want to pack my bags and leave without looking back. On Thursday night, I made my decision. She was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone like always, when I walked in and stood in front of her. "We need to talk," I said. She glanced up, annoyed. "What now, Greg?" "I'm filing for divorce," I said. Her eyes widened slightly, but she quickly masked her reaction. "Oh, come on. Don't be dramatic." "I'm serious, Lindsay. I can't do this anymore. You've made it clear where your priorities are, and they aren't with me or this marriage." She set her phone down and crossed her arms. "You're really going to throw everything away over one mistake?" "One mistake." I laughed bitterly. "You've been sneaking around with him for months. You don't even feel bad about it. If anything, you're mad at me for catching you." "I'm just saying," she said with a shrug. "You'll never find someone like me again. But if you want to ruin your life, be my guest." Her arrogance made the decision even easier. "Don't worry," I said coldly. "I don't plan on looking for someone like you ever again." The next day, I called a divorce lawyer. Saying the words, "I want to file for divorce," felt surreal, but also strangely liberating. The lawyer explained the process, warned me about the financial and emotional toll it might take, and asked if there was any chance of reconciliation. "No," I said firmly. "There's no going back." When I told Lindsay, she didn't seem shocked, but she wasn't happy either. "Fine," she said, her tone icy. "If that's what you want, go ahead. But don't expect me to make it easy for you." Of course, she didn't. She started making snide comments about how I'd never survive on my own, how I'd regret leaving her. She even had the nerve to say, "Ethan thinks I'm being too nice to you. I should have left you months ago." That was the last straw. I packed a bag and left that night, crashing at my buddy Kevin's place while we started the paperwork. The days after I left were some of the hardest of my life. Living out of a suitcase in Kevin's guest room wasn't exactly how I envisioned my future, but it was better than staying under the same roof as Lindsay. I blocked her on everything: Instagram, Facebook, even her number. She'd been sending me texts filled with half-hearted apologies and veiled threats like, "You'll regret throwing us away," or, "I hope you're ready for a lonely life, Greg." I wasn't about to let her gaslight me into thinking this was my fault. What really stung was how public she went with Ethan almost immediately. Barely 2 weeks after I moved out, she started posting pictures of them together. Beach selfies, candlelit dinners, even one where they were making out in front of some expensive-looking hotel. It was like she wanted me to see it to rub salt in the wound. Kevin tried to keep me distracted. He took me out for beers, introduced me to his coworkers, and even convinced me to join a gym. I hated every second of it at first, but slowly the routine started to help. I needed to move forward, even if it felt like I was dragging my heart behind me. About a month after I left, I got a call from an unknown number. Normally, I'd ignore it, but something told me to pick up. "Greg, this is Sarah Chase." Took me a second to place the name, but then it hit me, Ethan's mom. "What do you want?" I asked, my guard immediately up. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I thought you should know. Ethan's been seeing someone else." Her words hit me like a truck. "What?" "Yeah, it's not the first time," she said, her voice tinged with frustration. "Ethan has a habit of charming older women and moving on when he gets bored. He's been dating some producer's assistant for the past 2 weeks. I thought Lindsay deserved to know, but she's not answering my calls." The irony was almost too much to handle. "Well, that's not my problem anymore," I said. "I understand," she replied, "but I thought you should know. Lindsay might come crawling back to you, and you deserve better than that." She wasn't wrong. 2 days later, Lindsay called me. I ignored it. Then she sent a long, rambling text. "Greg, I know I messed up, and I'm sorry. Ethan wasn't who I thought he was. I've been so stupid. Can we talk? I miss you." I stared at the message, feeling a mix of anger and satisfaction. She'd thrown away our marriage for a fling with some wannabe actor, and now that he'd moved on, she expected me to pick up the pieces? Not a chance. I didn't reply. Instead, I focused on rebuilding my life. I moved into a small apartment, started seeing a therapist, and slowly began to find myself again. For so long, my life had revolved around Lindsay, making her happy, fixing her problems, dealing with her moods. Now, for the first time in years, I was putting myself first. It wasn't easy. There were days when I missed her, despite everything. But every time I felt the urge to call, I reminded myself of those emails, those pictures, and her cruel, dismissive words during our confrontation. A few months after our divorce was finalized, I got a letter in the mail. At first, I thought it was junk, but when I opened it, I saw Lindsay's handwriting. My stomach twisted. I didn't want to read it, but curiosity got the better of me. The letter was 3 pages long, rambling and emotional. She apologized, of course, but the words felt hollow. She wrote about how she missed the good times we'd had, how she regretted hurting me, and how she still thought of me as her rock. The kicker was the last paragraph. If you ever feel like giving us another shot, I'd love the chance to prove I've changed. I know it's a lot to ask, but maybe we could start over someday. I crumpled the letter and tossed it in the trash. Lindsay wasn't looking for reconciliation. She was looking for a safety net. I wasn't about to let myself be her backup plan again. That letter got me thinking about our relationship in a way I hadn't before. For years, I'd blamed myself for the little cracks in our marriage, the moments when things didn't feel quite right. I'd thought I wasn't attentive enough, not spontaneous enough, not fun enough. But looking back, I saw things differently. Lindsay always had a way of deflecting blame, making me feel like I was the problem even when her actions were clearly at fault. The affair wasn't the first time she'd been selfish. It was just the most obvious. Realizing that lifted a weight off my shoulders. For the first time, I stopped blaming myself. I wasn't perfect, but I'd done my best. Lindsay's choices were hers alone. About a year after the divorce, I ran into an old coworker, Emily, at a networking event. We'd always gotten along well but had lost touch over the years. We started catching up, and before I knew it, we were laughing like old friends. Emily was smart, kind, and refreshingly direct. Everything Lindsay wasn't. When she asked if I'd like to grab coffee sometime, I hesitated. I wasn't sure if I was ready to date again, but something about her felt different. We ended up meeting for coffee the next weekend, and one coffee turned into dinner, and dinner turned into hours of talking. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely seen and appreciated. Just as things were starting to look up, Lindsay reappeared in my life. She showed up unannounced at my apartment, looking disheveled and teary-eyed. "Greg," she said, her voice breaking. "I made such a mistake. I don't know what I was thinking, but I miss you. I miss us." I didn't let her inside. "Lindsay, it's too late for this," I said firmly. "But we have so much history," she pleaded. "Doesn't that mean anything to you?" "It did," I said. "But you threw it away. I'm not your safety net, Lindsay. You need to figure out what you want, but I can't be part of that anymore." She cried, begged, and tried every trick in the book, but I stood my ground. When she finally left, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't realized I needed. Emily and I kept seeing each other, and over time, our relationship grew into something I hadn't thought was possible after Lindsay. She taught me what it felt like to be with someone who genuinely cared, who didn't make me feel like I was always falling short. I wasn't naive enough to think everything would be perfect, but I knew one thing for sure. I'd never let myself settle for less than I deserved again. It's been 2 years now since I found out about Lindsay's affair, and my life is completely different. The pain I thought I'd never get over is now a distant memory. Every so often, I hear snippets about Lindsay through mutual friends. She's still in the entertainment world, chasing the same fleeting thrills that broke our marriage. Meanwhile, I've built something real, a relationship based on mutual respect and love, not ego and games. And as much as I wish I'd never gone through the betrayal, it taught me a valuable lesson. Sometimes, losing someone is the best thing that can happen to you. Thank you for listening to my story. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss new stories.